Hello, I'm Rachel from Dwensa Garden here in Ireland, and you are very welcome to this garden tour. Now, just recently I published my May garden tour, which concentrated on the other half of the garden, and I wasn't able to show this part of the garden because we were having the house painted and there were lots of obstacles in between. Well, those obstacles are gone now, so today we're just going to focus on this section of the garden, and I think it's quite interesting for anyone who has a small garden because this is a small portion of my garden. Okay, let's get on with the video. You are very welcome to this garden tour, and if you don't know the channel already, you should know that my garden is based in Wexford in Southern Ireland, and it's an acre in size, which is about half a hectare. That's a private garden, and I garden in what is commonly known as Zone 9, although we don't use the US system over here in Ireland, but we have quite mild winters and a lot of rain and dull days like this in summer. Anyway, we are going to look today at a small portion of the garden. If you want to see the whole thing, then you'll have to have a look at the May garden tour, which I'll link to at the very end of this. But anyway, right, in we go, and let's have a look at what flowers I have in bloom, because I do have a lot of very traditional things. You can see down there, probably, can you see the roses? So yeah, roses, everybody loves roses. Now, as I stand here, my patio doors are behind me, so I am looking straight up this pathway, and the idea here was that when I looked out from my kitchen out through the patio doors, this is what I would see, and the idea was to see something quite pretty. And for that reason, we have some pretty planting, some bedding planting in the urns that flank the two sides of this path. And just look at how vibrant these colours are. Really, really zingy. They jump out at you. Now, these are bedding plants that I bought, verbena and this other one here, which I just absolutely adored the colour of. And I think they're so vibrant. I don't go in for a lot of these kind of bedding plants at all. I just think it's quite wasteful, really, but I do allow myself these two pots here at the front of this section of the garden. On the right side of this path, we have a lot of Geranium, which was in flower not very long ago, but it's finished now and I've deadheaded it. I still think the leaves make a super statement. They're evergreen and they look great all through the summer. The common name for this plant is elephant ears, and I think you can see why. And if we look over the elephant ears here, you can see the main section of the garden, which isn't very big at all. One of the plants that is on this side is a geranium, and this is Geranium palmatum, one that people who can't grow Geranium madeirense tend to grow. Now, Geranium madeirense is monocarpic, it's glorious, it makes a big statement with its trunk, but it isn't hardy in my zone, but this one is, and that's why I grow it. And if we look here from the other side, you can see how this plant has seeded around the border down there with the peony on the left. Wasn't somewhere that I originally planted the plant, but it has seeded down there. And here at the top we have the very first border that was planted in my garden, although the plants and flowers in it have changed over the course of time. And here we have some roses. Underneath the roses we have a plant called Astilboides, and this is grown for its leaves, and they really are enormous. You can see by me just putting my hand in here how really big this plant is. Now, this is a plant that's supposed to be grown in semi-shade, and I do grow it in semi-shade. I love this plant really much, so I have loads of it in the garden, but whenever I grow it in semi-shade, it never does as well as it does in full sun like this one. It never gets as big. And above the Astilboides we have my roses, two two of the very few roses I have left in the garden, and the reason why they're left is because they are really great roses. Now the one on the left I have lost the label of, I'm afraid, but I think it might be Gertrude Jekyll. In fact, it is a very old rose. It flowers just once, it's beautiful and it's scented, and it's a spectacle when it's in flower, and then it finishes. And you know, I guess generally it's quite disease resistant because I don't spray my roses. I just feed them, I don't spray them. So it's really stood the test of time. The scent is very sweet and not delicate at all. Quite a punch in the face it gives you, but a nice kind of punch in the face. Does that make any sense? Anyway, the colours are soft and pretty, and it's just gorgeous. And I love this type of rose with very double presentation of flowers, almost like a cabbage. Just fantastic. And here's one that seems to have been broken off by something or other, so we'll just pick this and have a little closer look. Isn't it just gorgeous? Now the rose just to the right of, or left of, the one we've just looked at is called Celeste. I do have a name for this, and this is my absolute favourite rose, but it's not in flower yet, so we can't really talk about it. I did give it a radical pruning last year and actually thought I might lose it, but it had to be done. But I see it is even going to flower again this year, so check back soon and hopefully I'll be able to show you this one in glorious bloom. And just to the left of the roses we have a load of Alstroemeria, which have buds but aren't in flower yet. Now these are drop dead gorgeous when they're in bloom, and there's a crinum behind them, but they're not in bloom yet. Okay, enough of what's not in bloom yet. Let's go and have a look at the other things. And we also have Allium christophii in this section of the garden, and this Allium does really well for me, comes back year on year, an absolute star. And here we have my little pond, a very small pond that has stood the test of time, and in front of it is planted a saxifrage which has just been cut back, full of lovely pink flowers in spring, finished now and cut back. And can you see that in the middle of the pond there's actually a little fountain? It is solar powered. And here we have it, I guess, in full tilt. It's kind of a cute little thing. I bought online last year, so we'll see how long it lasts. Anyway, in the pond I have water lilies planted, and they were originally planted in a, well, in a pot, but I think they have crawled out of the pot and now line the whole base of the pond. And of course you can make a pond, it's easy to make a pond, but it does require a good bit of excavation. And even if you're planning on putting in a small pond like I've done here with a pond liner, you will be excavating more earth than you would have thought. It is just that bit of work, but it's a nice thing to have. And moving up from the pond, we have my Easter lilies. Now, these are what are known as Easter lilies in my part of the world, although I do believe there are different Easter lilies. There's Lilium longifolium is referred to as an Easter lily in other places. In any case, this isn't a true lily at all. It's a Zantedeschia. So actually from the aroid family, it's a plant that needs lots of moisture, and it's really enjoying this year. There's something very waxy and perfect about the flowers, almost unreal, but anyway, like they make a nice statement, and the leaves are great too, so the leaves look good before the flowers actually come. Now you can see that I've got 5 blooms in flower at the moment, but there's at least 4 more that are about to come, which is all great news. And just moving over from the Zantedeschia or Easter lilies, that bright green plant in there is a rare Lobelia called Rodgersia, more like a bush than a herbaceous thing, not in flower yet. But what we do have in flower is the six-hilled giant catmint, which smells wonderful. And look what a fantastic show this plant makes at this time of year in early June. Absolutely gorgeous. Cats are supposed to love it, but mine doesn't bother. So this is a Nepeta six-hilled giant, and a very tall one, which makes a fabulous filler in the border. Now, when it finishes flowering, it's a good idea to cut it back because it just looks better, you know, and then it regrows a bit and you may get a few flowers, but cutting back is very key to have a neat and tidy and colourful garden going through the summer. And above the Nepeta and the Zantedeschia we have delphiniums. Oh, delphiniums. I think everybody loves delphiniums. Now, there is some argument as to whether they're actually blue. It is a kind of mauvey purple, but gorgeous, gorgeous things to have in a garden. Now, delphiniums, as you can see, are very, very tall and very prone to breaking, so they do need staking. And I have staked mine low down. I have a video about how to do it somewhere else. I will link to that at the end. So you really need to stake your delphiniums. You need to feed them as well, and you need to give them a sheltered position. And hopefully then they will go on to do great things for you. Now, as you can see, not all of my delphiniums are open yet. We really just have the 2 spires that are open, and there are other ones coming, some of them not even with a single flower open yet. So I really look forward to that time of year. They are a wonderful, wonderful thing to have. I always feel they're a real luxury item to have in a garden. We're now moving over a bit to the right, and you will see lots of leafy growth in here. I have Rodgersia, I have Darmera, I have Hoheria. I have lots of things that give big leaves, but the Rodgersia is actually in flower. So these are my Rodgersia spires. They're not fully open yet. They're a kind of brown colour now, and they'll fade to a more creamy colour as the season goes on. Not a pure white like the Zantedeschia, the Easter lily, a kind of, well, a duller white, but nice as well. And they never need staking, which is always good. And just look at what beautifully textured and clean looking leaves they have. And at the back there is a hydrangea which will flower blue soon to echo the Nepeta and the delphiniums. And at the front we have the Darmera, which is a plant that likes lots of moisture. We've got several plants here that like lots of moisture. So in a normal summer here in Ireland where we get lots of rain, they do well. In a dry summer they don't do so great. But we've had a lot of rain this year, so everything's looking great. And a little bit further to the right we have the exit from this section of the garden, only a small section to the garden, and it's flanked by a couple of trees. On the right we have a twisted hazel, which is the one with the dark leaf, and on the left we have a Robinia called Twisty Baby. So the Robinia is a small tree, and it has the same habit as the hazel in terms of twisted branches. A very nice tree, and one I highly recommend. And here we have the hazel, and you can get twisted hazels with green leaves, but I prefer the dark leaf, so mine is a dark leafed one. And just here we have one of my bearded irises, and we still have a couple of flowers left, but this is the only one that's actually open yet, and I love the colours on it. I don't have a name for it, lost the label a long time ago. And just beyond the end of that path we have an area with not a whole lot going on, but what we do have is my beech cylinder, which is what we're looking at now. And those of you who follow the channel will recall when I planted this up, when I planted other hedging in, well, you can see the hedge strip behind it, but it isn't exactly how I want it yet, but it's getting there, and in time this will just be a mass of purple and green leaves clipped into a very neat shape. And now moving to the right, you can see the other plants that I have in this border here, and a number of trees, including the Hoheria tree, which is the big one right there at the back. And this flowered for the first time for me last year, so I hope it's going to flower again this year, but I see no evidence of buds. In this large permanent planter here we have my Sarracenia, which are insectivores, North American plants that eat insects, but they're not doing that at the moment because at the moment they're in flower. And don't they have just such wonderful flowers? I absolutely love them. Very unusual. Now this is a clever plant. It doesn't send up its pictures at the time that it's in flower because it wants to be pollinated. It doesn't want to catch and eat its pollinators. It waits until after they've done the job and then it sends up the pictures. Although in this particular planter you will see some evidence of pictures from different plants that are planted against other ones, so some are a bit slower than others. And down here we've lots of, well, hosta stuff going on, and a cute little allium there on the right. So this is an allium, so in the onion family, and one that's very closely related to the purple one with the tall purple spires that are so common in gardens at this time of year. So this one's a little bit different, and what I really love about it is how it dries. So after this one dries up, it looks like a fairy castle. You'll see what I mean a bit later on in the season when we can come back and have a look at it. And underneath this acer tree you can see some more of the Astilboides, which is the plant I showed you first, the one with the giant leaves. And you can see in here in the shade it's not doing as well as the one in the full sun. Now I will say that this one, although it's in shade, it doesn't have as much moisture as the other one because the tree roots will take away from it. It's doing okay, but I do like the size on the other one. And if we just look over here, let's see, there's another one down there. And just to the right of that we have my Melianthus, which it is the very first year I haven't had to cut it back. Now what usually happens with this shrub is that come spring it's looking fine, and then suddenly we have a late frost and it withers the leaves and I realise I have to cut it back after all. However, this year that late frost didn't arrive and the plant has done, it's gone on, and the result of that is that it ends up being bigger than it would have been. So Melianthus is chiefly grown for its leaves, which are a kind of blue colour. We would call them blue in gardening terms. In real terms, no, it's not blue at all. And it just gives a bit of an exotic feel to planting. And here you can see how big this plant is compared to me. So really quite a worthy one to have in a garden. I guess the real disadvantage with it is that you do have to cut it back in my climate in spring, and that kind of stymies it in terms of its growth, because when it's this height, well, that's just wonderful. That's what we all want, isn't it? Now it can produce flowers in spring. It has never done for me, but it can produce flowers which are quite attractive, but the main focus has got to be those giant blue leaves. Now it is flanked behind by mock orange, which is in bud, and some of you will recall how this section of the garden is covered in mock orange in June, and we have buds, so very soon this whole place is going to be awash with fragrant flowers. And a bit to the right we have a Trachycarpus fortunei, because, well, yeah, originally I did have several in this part of the garden, but this is the last one left. And in case you're wondering about this grass here, this is golden oats, or Stipa gigantea, one of my absolute favourite grasses. Tall, but it isn't dense in any sense, so it has that see-through quality which adds so much to any kind of planting. And these grass heads, they become really quite golden as the season progresses. My gosh, the birds are really noisy today, so I highly recommend Stipa gigantea. And let's just travel over here to the left, where I have a very small garden room I want to show you. Now, this little garden room is just to the left, and we don't have a lot of flowering going on here. It's more kind of a relaxing space. And here we have some beech columns, which is a structure that I'm fostering in this part of the garden. In time, these 4 beech columns here at the front will fill in and look like the 3 we just saw. And just a little bit further over to the left from there, and we have some planting of aeoniums, chiefly in this raised bed, which has 3 Stipa gigantea in it, and a lot of tender aeoniums that just get planted out for the summer and then get brought in again for the winter. And at the very front we have an alpine saxifrage. So this is called Saxifrage Lissadel, and it's in full flower at the moment, and the flowers really are so dainty. I absolutely love this one. Now it does need a well-drained soil and full sun, and it seems to do well in this spot. And I guess that brings me to the end of this video, just a kind of mini garden tour of this section of the garden which we missed out on before. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about any of the plants here, please feel free to jot them down below. Hopefully with the June garden tour, which will take place later in this month, I'll get to show you the whole of the garden together in its entirety. But for the time being, thank you very much for watching as always, and I will see you on the next video, which will be on Sunday. It will be a short, quick and easy video, less than 3 minutes, on what's the one I have, 3 of a particular type of garden plant. I hope you'll enjoy it, and then next Thursday you'll have a longer video like this one to look forward to. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.